Quick prayer.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was, of course, going to sing lots of bitter songs about being dumped. I can't help myself, because tomorrow I've got to go and play at a wedding, and I've got to sing lots of happy, lovely songs about being in love, when I have, in fact, just been dumped. Very recently, by a real person, not even by an imaginary 22-piece band. So I thought I would use the opportunity this evening to get the venom out of my system ready for tomorrow. So this is a song inspired by all the people who said to me, never mind, at least you'll have plenty of new material. It's called Thank You for Giving Me Something to Write About. Thank you for giving me something to write about. Thank you for giving me pain. Thank you for giving me a heartache and sleepless nights over and over again. Thanks for the paranoia. Thanks for the crippling self-doubt. Thank you for giving me nothing and something to write about. Thank you for saying I look so much better on photos from 10 years ago. Thanks for critiquing the looks and the manners of everyone else that I know. Thanks for the tips on grooming. Thank you for spotting my slouch. Thank you for giving me nothing and something to write about. My friends keep telling me ditch negativity, try and move on with a grin. They say lay off with the anger and misery, give things a positive spin. Well, it's hard to discover a positive spin on the fact that you've broken my heart, but at least I can pour all my agony into my art. So, thank you for making me change into something more smart before taking me out. Thank you for stopping me talking on subjects I clearly know nothing about. Thanks for correcting my spelling and for every flaw you pointed out. Thank you for making me feel less than nothing, because you gave me something to write about. Does anyone write songs when they were a teenager? Has anyone still got any of them?
Yeah.
Or have you all burned them? Well, I happened to discover in an old folder while I was moving house after being chucked out, an old, frayed old tatty little piece of paper with the first song I ever wrote on, and I think he was about 12, possibly 13, and he was about a boy called Mark Cusack, who was very sexy, and always put his comb in his back pocket, which I thought was really cool. Anyway, this is a song, of course, about teenage love. We've all grown up a lot since this, but it may stir some memories. Why don't you like me? 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 Deep. I like you. I like every single thing about you. From the top of your sweet head down to that small mark on the side of your left shoe. I like everything about you. although I'm always very careful not to stare, I'm always aware exactly where you're standing. Why don't you think of me? 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 Why don't you ever think of me? I think of you, even though I often wish that I did not have to. It seems as if my insides have been stuck like glue to a photograph of you. Why don't you like me? 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 Why don't you like